I wanted to tell you about the national championship game in 2017. This is a very popular game. That was 2nd and 26. That's Tua Tagovailoa to Devontae Smith. He's not the one who started the game, of course. You guys remember how the game went. This is not to recap the game. But I live in Nashville now. I just moved up here. I've been here about 2 months, and a lot, believe you me, has happened in the 2 months that I've been here. Sometimes when I first got here, I would be driving downtown, and if you live in any kind of major city, Nashville is no different. You know, if you're downtown at the wrong time, if you miss a turn, it's going to take you 20 minutes to circle a block. And there may be times where your GPS is unclear or it just freezes up on you, and you just kind of close your eyes, kiss your hand twice, touch the ceiling, and hope you're turning on the right road. That feeling when you turn down the right road, that's kind of how Alabama must have felt once that game ended. It was a literal soap opera. Do you recall all the stuff that happened? Not how the game ended. Colin and I were talking before the show. Alabama, not only does Georgia thrash them in the first half, Alabama goes into the locker room shutout. They had a player collapse on the sideline. They had a fight on their sideline. They had to bench their starting quarterback. All these things happened in the span of a 4-quarter game, and they won the game. Not against Mercer, not against UL Monroe, against the University of Georgia for a national championship. But remember context, okay? This is where I want to give you some access. The month prior, Alabama had gone to the Iron Bowl against Auburn, and they lost that Iron Bowl. They got beat 26-14. And that was a game that Jalen Hurts started. There had been a buildup. If you cover Alabama, if you follow Alabama very, very closely, you had heard the whispers about some kid out of Hawaii named Tua Tagovailoa. Recruiting fanatics knew about him. Elsewhere, people had only seen him in garbage time. And he looked really good in garbage time, but he was still a true freshman. And as the season goes on, you start hearing whispers from people you probably trust saying, you know what we're hearing out of practice is Jalen Hurts is the more trusted quarterback. He's the one Saban's going to go with. But there are a lot of people in the Alabama program who really think Jalen Hurts is their second best quarterback. You get to the Iron Bowl, and they lose. And offense is very stagnant in the second half. Well, what I did as that game was ending, mainly because I hate being on the field when it gets stormed, is I went up the tunnel before the game was over. And I saw Alabama come up their tunnel. And I know that on the surface, the perception a lot of people have of the Alabama program is one that is very buttoned down, very professional, stone-faced, and it was anything but that. There's a lot of drama behind the scenes with them, just like there is other programs. It's just they've got the best head coach in a generation or multiple generations that doesn't let you know about it. And they win in spite of it a lot of time. So that team comes up, and you would think you were witnessing a borderline mutiny, especially from some of the wide receivers who were irate that no change had been made at the quarterback position. So I'm observing all this. I talked about it a little bit on the show the following week, but I didn't get into specifics. I don't think it's my business to do that. And some things are better left unsaid. But Auburn goes on to the SEC championship game. They lose to Georgia. Alabama ends up getting in the playoff. They go beat Clemson. The plan was for Tagovailoa to play against Clemson. It just was a game that unfolded in such a manner where defense stifled Clemson, and there was never a point where Tua Tagovailoa needed to play. And then comes the national championship game. And we're approaching halftime, and it's obvious. Hurts ain't got it, and they don't have it with him at quarterback. I had no doubt they were going to make the change at halftime. I had resigned myself to the idea that Georgia was winning this game regardless. I had already started to get my talking points ready because I was there in dual roles. I was covering it for the late kick that I did at the time independently down in Columbus, Georgia, but I was also there covering it for the news station that I worked for in Columbus, so I didn't really have time to worry about that. I had to get my on-field stuff ready because we had live stand-ups to do post-game. We had all kinds of stuff to do post-game. And so I've already got my Georgia stuff ready. We go down to the field in the fourth quarter. Weird feeling that I don't know that I've ever felt it in any other walk of life, but it happens a lot covering SEC football, I'll tell you that. So I've felt it a few times, and this game was one of them. Being on the field when they completed that pass in overtime to Tua Tagovailoa, Devontae Smith, Alabama wins that game. I just pulled out the iPhone. This is footage I actually shot. So got right there as close as I could to the dog pile because I knew you guys would want to see that footage, and there's the footage Colin's playing for you right now. Again, witnessing history real time. And all the while, you remember, at Auburn, a month prior, People had wanted Nick Saban to make the change he made in this game, and he didn't make it. People had wanted all season, including members of that coaching staff, for him to make that change, and he hadn't made it. And then he finally made it. And to understand how much stuff had just happened in that game, and they ended up winning it anyway, was incredible. So being on the field afterwards, I've been on the field for a lot of big Alabama games. They've played in a lot of them. I've been there for every one of them. Never seen Nick Saban act like he did afterwards. Not just on the field. Being around him once he gets up that tunnel, once he gets in the locker room, and there's not necessarily many live cameras left around, an outpouring of emotion. He had the exact same one the following year when they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, when Jalen Hurts came in and replaced Tua Tagovailoa. The only time I think I've ever seen tears in his eyes was when he got up the tunnel after that. But it was much the same way in this game. Afterwards, I didn't leave till the sun came up the following morning because I only lived an hour south of Atlanta at the time. I remember Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler, long after the confetti had settled, came down there. They came in Alabama's locker room. And just, I can imagine being on the broadcast team. You know someone's popping not a VHS version but a digital version of that game in 50 years from now and showing it to their kids and their grandkids. And in my case, I get to say, hey, man, I was on the field. Look at that. There I am. But in any event, if you're an Alabama fan, you're popping that in saying, look at what happened. And if you're in that broadcast booth, that's how your mind works real time. But that was one of probably the most surreal moment that I've had the pleasure of witnessing live so far in my career in this avenue. And it was amazing to see, but on the drive home that morning following, all I could think about was how many tumblers had to fall into place. Because once you lose that Iron Bowl, your fate's out of your hands. And as fate would have it, you get to go to that playoff and remembering what the scene was. While everyone else is thinking about what Tagovailoa had just done, all I could think about is remember what the scene was down that tunnel at Auburn when they had just lost. If you had told me in that very moment that this was going to be the way their season ended, I would have bet you any amount of money that you were crazy. That's why you love college football. And that's why people are so desperate to have it return this year.